So
That
for
was
people, who are new to this,
yeah.
that are saying, "Oh, come on, what do you mean you're not your personality?"
Mm.
Talk to me about that thing that is beyond your personality, that is really who you are,
Okay.
and how you have discovered that, and what that means. Because it's almost like in spirituality, we talk about as that as the observer, the one that's watching, the one who is watching,
Mm.
the one who is watching the watcher, right?
Yeah.
And so how did you discover that? Because that's your work now, the life beyond personality. And
Yeah.
can you help people, bring people to the life beyond personality? If
I
they
think
read the books, will that be what will happen?
um, if they are ready to hear it, it would absolutely be what will happen because they will be able to use it. But if someone isn't ready or, you know, tuned into this, it won't help them at all. They would just find it confusing and gobbledygook.
Yeah.
So I'm very clear that this is not for everyone. But I do feel that I've found something that's incredible. And through my career of storytelling, which is basically about breaking stories up into ordering facts, ordering bits of information to tell a story in the best, most productive, most effective way. And what I've had to do with what was shown to me, what I've found, is do the same thing. So in my books, that was my aim. And I very carefully cover each subject in order because it builds into a kind of compendium, like a web of knowledge, and what one chapter builds on the previous one. And if someone, you know, a lot of people, okay, how do you get into this? You asked, how did I find that place? Well, it all began when I was 15 years old and I was cycling down by the river 2 miles away. And I had what I call an opening. Somebody might call it a story. And basically I was a 16-year-old boy and I had all the usual ups and downs and confusions and problems of a 16-year-old boy. But in that opening, something happened where I was shown that I wasn't just that. There was something that was beyond all that and beyond the way that me was manifesting in that moment. And that place was beyond, I won't say it was beyond thought because I could still think, but it was certainly beyond any negative thoughts. It was very blissful in the body. It was absolutely peaceful. It was absolutely still. And it had no need of getting anything from anyone because it was fed directly. It was an experience of love that was directly perceived. So I had these experiences a few times throughout my early life, and they showed me there was another perspective to life. So my quest became to understand what they meant and what was the significance of them to the rest of the life that I lived, where I would have problems and unblissful, difficult times like everyone else.
Yeah.
So this was my quest. And of course, I embarked on this journey, and you go to the places where people apparently say they have the answers with teachers and spiritual traditions and everything. And I did this for a long time, and I really learned a lot. And that's kind of knowledge, but that's not the same as knowing what I knew in that opening. So many, many years later, I had this breakdown, and really, this is a classic example of something that's the most terrible thing turning into the greatest thing. Now, I didn't know that at the time.
Right.
And this thing we talked about earlier, when you said, how did you know? That one in the midst of that hell was somehow in there. And that was the one that got me through it. And it was bad, it was bad. But that one somehow, and I brought it forward through writing. That was my particular way. By writing about what was coming up for me, the emotions and the feelings and the confusion and the lostness, I had this slight gap, this slight distance to it. And gradually over 7 years, I don't want to kind of lessen how bad it was in any way and make, all I had to do was write a bit. This was serious, heavy suffering. But I tell you, if I can get through that, anybody can get through anything, you
Yeah.
know. And it was that one in me, that part, which the same one that experienced and observed those openings was the same one that observed this breaking down of this personality and taught me what personality is, how it functions, how we get lost in it, and how we can be free of it.
Wow. And when you say it's the same one, is that a person? Is that a feeling? Is that, and without, like, what I'd like to do, just so people get an idea, without going into 4-part harmony and full orchestration, what were some of the qualities of the lowest of lowest feelings that you felt, so that people can know it wasn't just a paper cut, you know,
Yeah,
because that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So if you can touch
yeah,
on the depth of your
sure.
discovery.
I'll try and paint a picture of it. So if you can imagine, I was on the way to on a holiday. I'd been quite stressed. I was about an hour outside London driving west. I suddenly felt really bad, had bad stomach ache. I'd stopped at a petrol station, a gas station, and I fell to the floor. Now we have an operating system which allows us to know I'm here, you're there, my name is Jez, your name is Danny, I'm going down the shops, I know how to get there, I know how to get back, I know who I am, I know who you are. And if you can imagine for a moment that operating system collapsing, so rather than being, I was 44 or something, rather than being 44 years old and having all the abilities of that 44-year-old person learned from a lifetime, the operating bit, the bit that knows how to put things together and operate within the world, collapsed. And I was literally on the floor, and I mean, it was terror, and I didn't know how I was going to get back. I didn't know what was happening to me. I was crying. People were staring at this grown man crying. It was just terrible. But
It sounds like you didn't even have a sense of who you were in relationship to a world around you, that your identity was somehow collapsed at the same time. Was that true?
I did have a sense of the world around me. I remember observing people staring and being freaked out, but I had no ability to do anything about it, to pull myself together. None whatsoever.
Wow.
That was the gist of what happened. And then over the following years, it was a kind of unraveling of that. And it basically went back to childhood trauma. And that was kind of what unraveled over the following years. But it happened for me in this form of, it turned me into a recluse because I couldn't operate in the world.
Totally. And just to clarify, was that a drug-induced something that happened as a result of drugs, or just completely out of the blue? Something.
No, I'm not a drug taker at all.
Okay.
I don't take any drugs whatsoever.
Okay. So somehow out of the blue, as you were traveling on a vacation.
But Danny, I wouldn't say it was, sorry to interrupt, I wouldn't say it was out of the blue, because I kind of had if you saw it as an earthquake, I had a kind of tremor. I was giving a talk. My work involved me talking to students and book people and schools. And I was giving this talk to all these adult librarians. I'd done it many times, and I knew how to do it, and I quite enjoyed doing it.
Yeah.
But on this occasion, the one that can operate and knows how to do that kind of slipped away just before I was going on. Terrible, terrible situation.
Wow.
Anyway, somehow I got through it, but I was seriously shaken. And what happened in the breakdown half a year later was the kind of fulfillment of that, really.
Wow. Wow. And so what did you do? How did you get from where that petrol station to wherever the heck you were going? What happened?
Well, we were heading to Cornwall, which is the far west of southern England, and we were an hour out, and I couldn't drive. I mean, my wife was with me. My wife doesn't drive. So we had to go home. So to leave the car there, I was taken by ambulance to the hospital. They thought I was wasting their time with a panic attack. They had absolutely no understanding. They weren't trained for this. The doctor was very dismissive, quite horrible, really. I managed, oh, he did give me that was the only pill I had. He gave me some kind of mild sedative that allowed my heart, because my heart was going crazy, to
I'm sure.
rest enough for me to just about get on a train, go home. And then I remember sitting downstairs here thinking, what just happened? So my life went from here to here. And my whole life, if I had to pick one moment in my whole life, that was the moment when my life changed forever.
Wow. And so and that was how many years ago?
That was in 2004. 15 years. I had the anniversary because it was August 15th. So
wow.
I always think 15 years now, you know.
So in the 15 years from that to now, can you in any way, shape, or form put together the pieces of what actually did happen? Do you know now what that was?
Yes, I kind of do. Yeah. Yeah. I have a broad outline of what it was. Yeah. And I could trace the roots of it to what happened. To tell you some of it, I mean, basically, my mother was postnatally depressed. And I know that my particular wound, we can talk about what I mean by that, was very much based around coming into this world and perceiving, even though it was pre-verbal, that my love source was kind of absent.
Yeah.
So, you know, without going into details,
right,
that wound kind of stamped my life, and
wow.
it gave me terrible suffering, but it also, because of having applied myself and gone into this, it gave me a way out of suffering.
Wow.
That was beyond that particular version of it, which has led me to write these books and talk about this.
So talk to me now, because as you are speaking, I'm 100% sure that many of the people that are listening, whether the scorecard is exactly the same as yours and the players are exactly the same, they know that moment where they don't feel that source of what they want, that love that they're looking for, there, right? And so
I call that the wound.
Yeah, the wound.
Yeah.
I think we've all felt that wound. So what I think fewer people have felt, not nobody, but fewer people have felt the transition from that wound to the healing.
Yes.
What for you was that moment? Not even the moment. What is for you is the experience of moving from that place where that wound now gets healed up, or that it no longer stamps the imprint of your life with the wound, but allows you the vision to say, that gave me the opportunity to have a new stamp in my passport that is the healing.
Well, I come back to really this phrase of discovering what life beyond personality is. And what that means is, what happened was a disidentification with personality. So as long as you're identified with your personality, the wound is part of that story. Now, although it happened in my life very early, because my mum was postnatally depressed, in general, we don't come into the world with that pain, with that wound. We come into this world of what I call the natural state. So everybody out there knows this. They may not know it consciously now, but they have experienced this. And it's in their potential to know this. So the only thing that's happened to me is that I've kind of made it conscious. It has become conscious, and there's a difference between me saying I have made it. It has become consciousness because I didn't do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so we spoke a little, and neither one of us is interested in it that much anymore. But is that what drove you to places like Rajneesh and to places, you know, of that the sort of the sense of how do I relieve this pain? Because it would seem like so obvious to go to people who seem like they know something more to help you. And in some ways he did. And so what was less about the experience of him in the place, but more the hope that here's somebody that has the answers for me and may have the answers for you. He on his own may have had those answers, right? But then the situation around him became disheartening for you. How do you heal again from that?
From having pursued it within a particular situation and then found it not to be.
Yeah.
I was only involved for 2 years. So my for me, it wasn't too much of a trauma leaving. I mean, I
Right.
had some great experiences. We've
Totally.
all watched Wild Wild Country, I presume.
Yeah.
And I remember being there at the commune in those years in Oregon and thinking, one day they're going to make a film about this. Of course, then they did. Yeah, it became very crazy, and it became not at all, as far as I'm concerned. And I had to leave that and leave other places like that, because in the end, I do believe, I'm kind of pulling back to this theme. You asked earlier on, what was it in you that knew that?
Yeah.
That thing, that the knowing, let's call it, everybody has to find their own knowing. And as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter who you're with, how advanced they are, how great they are. You could be sitting at the feet of the Buddha tomorrow. If you don't have find it yourself, you haven't got it. You know?
I love that. There's a saying in India, they say that the pickpocket will only see the pockets of a saint. They won't see anything else about it. And so again, who we are determines what we see, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but that's a scary process. The idea of living life without personality is a scary process.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that fear? I'm imagining people now listening and saying, wow, his existence is so, I can see why he would have done it, but why do I need to do it? My highs are not that high. My lows are maybe not that low. Why do I need to get out of this personality?
Yeah.
And what would you say to them?
I would say, first of all, you don't need to get out of it. And for
Beautiful.
most people, you shouldn't. Because if this is not in you, if you try and do this, you're going to just create more suffering and more, oh, I haven't got it, I can't find it, I'm not good enough. And the whole cycle goes round. But if this yearning is within you, and this inner sense that there's something in this, there's some truth in this that has something for you. And I think most people know that. Now, I'm an artist. When I'm writing a song at the moment, and I'm constructing these chords. And every now and again, I come and pick up the guitar and play it. And every now and again, the muse tells me, try this chord. And I hear this melody in my head and I think, yeah, that's the next chord. So I'm trying to symbolize this feeling of the knowing. And if someone hears what I'm saying or reads my books and it resonates with them, if they have that yearning inside, that knowing will say, listen to this guy and see what he's got to say. Not believe anything, and that's a crucial point. Don't believe anything I say, but find out. And the root of what I'm doing, the word I always come back to is inquiry. This is an inquiry. I've had my inquiry, and in some ways it's still going on, but it's your inquiry, because for the reason that I've just said, that you have to find your own understanding of this. Otherwise, it's just secondhand knowledge. It's not much use to you. It's not going to make much difference. You know?
I love it. You say almost word for word what I would say, because sometimes people will come to me and say, well, what did you do to get on this path? And I said, if you don't have to, do everything you possibly can not to, because once you embark on the journey, it's going to turn your world upside down. It's going to take everything you believe and throw it off the table. Yes. But there are gentle people there that will help you pick pieces up that still belong. But if you don't need to, if you're okay, if you're getting through life without the desire or the need to throw everything off your table, keep going with your table.
Sure.
Right? And so Go ahead.
I was just going to say that you asked kind of what pushes one to that place beyond personality. And it is the classic, it is suffering.
Yeah, totally.
If you're suffering, now the suffering I experienced in the personality was so acute. I mean, I actually feel I nearly died. There were a couple of times when I could feel something leaving me. And my wife somehow knew what to do, and she held my feet.
Wow.
And she said, don't leave, you're loved, you're needed here, or something to that effect. And something stayed. But the suffering was so acute. Therefore, the impulse in me to find what was beyond it, because I did know there was something beyond it, because I had been blessed with these openings throughout my life. So that impulse was so strong, and I absolutely agree with you. You know, if your suffering is not that great,
Totally.
you know, enjoy your life as it is.
Yeah, until, because you'll come up, eventually you'll come upon it. But how do you get to the life beyond personality?
I would say through this word inquiry. You get to it by seeing, and to some extent anyway, understanding what personality is. When that starts happening, what's beyond it starts to be revealed. Now, what's beyond, you might say, well, then what is beyond it? Can't pin it down. Well, I use the example of the natural state that we all enter this world in as a way of describing what life beyond personality is. And there's four fundamental aspects that I talk about. So one is the stillness. So that's the stillness that I felt in those openings. So this is, you know, personalities can be very busy. Personalities like to distract. Personalities don't want to see life as it is. Personalities have an agenda to maintain the personality. So anything that takes them to that 1 degree you talked about, there's a resistance to that, from the personality. The second thing is full feeling engagement with life. Now, what I mean by that is we come in the natural state and babies do nothing but feel. Through feeling, they engage with their environment. Through the personality, after the wound, we learn that feeling can be dangerous and can be painful. So we retreat from it. And you know, you could make a case that the more one retreats from feeling, the more one retreats, the dial of your life energy is turned down. So feeling is very much a part of this. And a return to life beyond personality involves full feeling engagement with life. There's no repression.
Yeah.
So if something comes up, and things can still come up that are difficult, it's not that all that stuff just instantly goes away, but one has a different relationship to it.
Yeah.
And the relationship to it is that one is open to feeling it. And of course, by feeling it, it moves, and it moves through you.
So let me expand on this for you, or understand it a little bit better, because I have exactly same terminology, but I call it that what happens in life is when we become vulnerable, or before we become vulnerable, what we do is we protect ourselves with silos, because we've been hurt so many times that we start to build silos around ourselves, and we paint the outsides of our silos with images of ourselves so that everybody thinks they're looking at us, but inside we're just covered in the ground, crying like a little baby, hoping no one will ever see us, because we are trying to maintain this persona. So we live in these silos. What I believe you're saying is that when you get to that place where you just allow those silos to melt, where you become vulnerable enough to feel, it doesn't mean pain won't come, but we deal with that pain in a different way.
There's a different relationship to it, I would say. There isn't this relationship to, this is painful, I need to get away from it. There's a kind of trust that what comes is what comes. I'm not going to die. I mean, one thing I really learned from the breakdown is if I can get through that, you know, and I didn't die through that, I can certainly feel a bit of old pain or grief or fear. You know, there's nothing compared to it, you know.
Right.
So it's a different relationship to it. And it's actually quite beautiful, because it's just life passing through a human form. We all have sadnesses. You know, in my book, I talk about when my father died in 2016, and I had in some ways, not the closest relationship, but in the last few years, I became quite close with him because I was with him a lot, and some of his, what I would say was the difficult side of his personality kind of waned, and I could sort of feel him more. And within that, although we were still very different, there was an understanding and a connection. And it was quite interesting, because one thing I had with my dad was he taught me to play chess when I was a boy, and I stopped playing for years, but maybe 10, 15 years ago, I picked it up again. And I realized that this was a great way for me to connect with my dad. So every time I visited my dad, we'd play chess.
Fabulous.
When we played chess, he went beyond his personality, and he became like a little boy. He could become he was like 86 or something. He could become really excited about what was happening. So I loved that as a medium to meet him. And now I've forgotten why I was talking about my dad. Ah, yeah. So my dad passed away. And like I said, I found a bit of closeness to him. I came back and I suddenly found myself howling the night it happened. And this brings me on to the third aspect of the natural
Perfect.
state of being. There's a part of me, there's a part of all of us that watched that howling. So right in the middle of it, I'm not blocking it in any way. I'm not judging it. I'm absolutely letting go into this torrent of grief. There's some part watching. Now, this is the third aspect, and this is what I call choiceless awareness. Now, I call it choiceless. Tell me if I'm talking too much. Am I?
No, you're talking
Okay,
beautifully.
okay.
I want you to talk.
There's so much to say. The reason I call it choiceless awareness, I'm contrasting it with personality awareness. Now, personality awareness chooses what it wants to look at and what it doesn't want to look at. And you've just kind of told a little story about that when you look in the mirror. Because personality doesn't want to be confronted with anything that antagonizes it, that makes it feel vulnerable. So it will look away. I'll look at that, but I won't look at that. I'll open to that person. I won't open to that person because I find them confronting. So that's what I call personality awareness. Choiceless awareness doesn't have that filter. So whatever's happening, whether it's the grief coming or whatever, it will confront it fully. And that choiceless awareness is what I felt in those openings. And that is the common denominator all the way through.
Yeah. I love that. So now you've identified for us, which you've always known, but you identified for us what that place is that I remember.
You got there in the end.
And beautifully and perfect timing. And do you have a practice? Like, I already know people are going to want to get in touch with you to learn how to do this stuff. Do you have something that will help them? Is that in your books? Do you have programs that you can do to offer to people?
Okay, Danny, there are no practices in this. Okay, absolutely. I don't do practice. I do inquiry. And it comes back to the point I was making, that this is not something you can practice and learn. It comes through your own engagement with it, through your inquiry, and then it opens up spontaneously inside. So my books serve to help that inquiry happen. They're just mirrors to open up so one can take that journey and look at those subjects, but then for those subjects to open up for them. The thing is that you mentioned the word practice. So I don't go through the day thinking about this stuff and thinking about choiceless awareness or stillness. One lives those things. One only thinks about them when one is trying to convey to Danny about them. Well, the fourth one is joy, and I use it joy with a capital J. And I do feel that there is a natural joy in the natural state. Now, joy can be, people see it in different ways. Some people see it as a kind of excitement or a happiness. And I'm not talking about that sort of joy. It's a joy that's innate, and it's simply the joy that we have been made this way as human beings. We've been made to feel and interact with the world, and a very natural, organic joy just arises from that. And it can be in, rubbing soap over your body in the shower and the contour of your arm. It can be, obviously, it can be bare feet walking on the grass. It can be anything. But those kind of joys get turned up phenomenally, I would say, because they're not blocked by the personality. And that's what I call our original relationship to life, when these things, joy just becomes a kind of ongoing. Now, I'm not saying all of life is joyful.
Right. No, we've already gone through that. That's
exactly.
Right. So,
but there is a kind of joy that is part of this, that it gets turned up. That's for sure. Yeah. And there's a kind of, I get joy from my creativity. Gives me phenomenal joy. Just the fact that somehow this songs come through, and the melody comes and the lyric comes, and where does it come from? I have no idea, but I know it's got something. I will also have phenomenal joy in other people's creativity. I love hearing a song and thinking, God, that's perfect. The way they put that with that. And
of all the things that we've spoken about, If you could leave people with one thought, what would that one thought be?
That's difficult. I mean, I'm tempted to first of all say that you're not your personality. And the reason that's important is because your personality is the part that holds all the suffering. So there is a place beyond suffering. There is a way to live this life without being dominated by that mind that criticizes you all the time, by the thoughts that say you can't do this, you can't have this, you can't have love, whatever. So I would say that in a very long-winded answer.
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful answer.
Mm.
And then the final question that I always ask can be followed up with a question if there needs to be. But when you look at the world that we live in today, with all that's going on in it, and all its advances and all the turmoil that's happening in the world, is this the world you always dreamed of handing over to your kids and your children's children?
I've got a few responses to that. The first one is, I didn't dream. I don't really think about that. Now, it may be partly because I don't have kids of my own, but of course I can extrapolate and imagine that. The second answer would be, yeah, the world is obviously in a hell of a state. And I would say the reason for that is people do think they are their personalities and they're totally identified with them. The third point is, I'm not sort of saying we can save the world through this if everyone gets this.
Right.
Not that that couldn't happen, but right. I don't really think the world needs saving in that way. The world is as it is, A, and B, it's not my place to think that I can change those things.
Totally.
Because I don't think anything I have gained is not through anything I have done. It's absolutely through non-doing, through receiving. So the idea that I could, so then you might say, well, why did you write the books? Well, simply there's a kind of overflowing of sharing of what I've been given. But the second stage of what happens to that, how many people it reaches or helps, is utterly beyond me and really nothing to do with me. That's up to life. And if two people get it, fantastic. You know, even on that level. Of course, as an artist, you want to connect with people, and that's part of the cycle of energy. Yeah, so I would say that.
So I understand that you don't feel that anything you're going to do the world doesn't need you to change it. No. Right? That it will. I completely get that.
What would that be?
But if there was one thing that you would recommend people do to remove themselves from their personality, what would be the starting thing that you would do? What's one thing that they could do?
I think the only thing because I don't really deal with practice, but the only thing I would say is ask questions.
Inquiry.
Ask who you are. Inquiry. Ask who you are. Ask if you're feeling bad. Ask why. Now, when I was in that breakdown, and I was having these terrible feelings of lostness and terror, I inquired day after day, what is this? And I had a kind of idea, and then I'd travel into it, and I'd get more insights, and that is the way in, really. That choiceless awareness being applied to one's life and one's experiences, and to the suffering and to the good parts. And why does that make me feel bad? Why does that make me feel so good? In the end, that's what delivers this to someone.
I don't know about you, but I'm going to read those books, and I hope you will too, because this intoxicatingly beautiful idea of the life that exists beyond our personality, how exquisite. Thank you again, Jess, for being on the show with us. Thank you again, listeners, for coming and listening and spending your days with us. And from the bottom of my heart, Jess, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Danny. I appreciate the work you're doing.
It's my absolute honor, brother. Okay. Until next time, we'll see you soon.